The difficulty in being Jesus returned, one of the core difficulties, is that the purpose of him and his return is to bring truths that we have not had access to before. And that is not what we wish his purpose to be. We do not wish for him to come here and tell us things that are going to help us. We wish for him to come here and do things for us. Do it all for us. Do it to us. Give it all to us. Jesus will, of course, be the most popular man in the world because he will do it all for us, make everything better for us, and we won't have to do any of it ourselves. Anybody who shows up around these parts claiming to be Jesus returned had better be prepared to prove who he is by making us know who he is. Yes, we do like the idea of free will, but in this specific instance, no. In this specific instance, we wish for it to be done for us, done to us. We don't want to be shown how we can be better, how things can be better. We want it to be made better. We want the world to be made better for us by somebody else, by him. Perhaps a few of you may feel a twinge of compassion for the man we believe shouldn't need any, as he makes himself the most unpopular man in the world. One might think that the task of bringing us truths that are deeply profound and ultimately deeply beautiful, truths that are going to help us in deeply profound and deeply beautiful ways, should be an easy task for one such as him. But that's only because one is not taking the other half of the equation into account. We are not taking us into account. Here is the thing. To introduce a person or a world to truths they have not been operating by inherently means to be showing that we have not been operating by these truths so far. And how many of us, Christian, atheist, agnostic, or whatever, like to be told that we are wrong and have been all along. How many of us are ready, willing and able to have our errors pointed out to us? Can you answer that question honestly for yourself? Poor old Jesus. Poor old me. The reason that Jesus is the most unpopular man in the world is because he is the destroyer of belief in lies. Lies that we do not wish to stop believing in. Lies that you do not wish to stop believing. And it matters not to him which lies you believe in, whether they be the lies of the atheist or the lies of the Christian. This time around, my name is Yanto. I am the man that was here in previous times, who is commonly referred to as Jesus. I am returned, just as you also are returned, and I do not care if you are atheist or Christian, agnostic or God-believer, religious aspirant or non-religious spiritualist. I am here to show lies for what they are and truth for what it is. And this will inevitably make me unpopular with all religions, all sciences, all cultures, all governments, all parties. So be it. I care about us all far too much to let that stop me. Shall we get into it? The first group of people I can only be unpopular with is the rationalists. I will define the rationalists here as those who look to human reasoning over and above those religious and or spiritual beliefs that are based in divine or intuitive inspiration for their understanding of reality, for their understanding of what we are, why we are, how we are. The rationalist desires an understanding based on logical reasoning that makes cognitive sense to them. The rationalist does not necessarily need their understanding to feel right, so long as it makes a sense that they can process with the mind. So, for example, a rationalist may subscribe to the concept of space-time as a description of physical matter affecting the shape, size, and density of both space and time. To this particular rationalist, it does not matter if it doesn't feel like it makes sense, that the spatial dimensions themselves could be bent, stretched, warped this way and that, so long as the maths and empirical observation they are using to describe it add up in some useful way. For the rationalist, if the numbers and observations add up, then it must be true. I can only be unpopular with the rationalists, not because I do not agree that our understanding should make cognitive sense. I very much do concur with this, but because I am more rational than the rationalists have been throughout human history and up to the present day. Here are some of the things that I am more rational about than our rationalists. Our rationalists believe that the presence of physical phenomena causes mathematical truths to be true. I know this is the exact opposite of the actual truth of the matter. I know that unchanging mathematical truths cannot be emergent from a phenomenon that is always an expression of change over space and time. And I know that all that does change over space and time can only change over space and time, must only change over space and time, in order to remain in agreement with those truths that are unchanging. Our rationalists believe that quantities of physical qualities can be multiplied by themselves, that there is such a thing as nothing at all, and that negative numbers represent quantities of less than zero. I know that none of this is true. I know that negative numbers and imaginary numbers are only helpful hacks for not understanding that there is no such thing as nothing at all. Our rationalists believe that human consciousness is a product of the human brain, that the human brain forms first, and that the consciousness of that human is emergent from the forming of that brain. I know that all and everything that expresses over space and time can only do so relative to all and everything else that is also expressing over space and time. I know that truths having to iterate relative to each other is mechanistically synonymous with truths being conscious of each other. Truths that cannot not be true must iterate, and they must iterate relative to each other, and they must remain in agreement with each other as they iterate, which is what consciousness is. Dear rationalists, if given the choice between being allowed to study both the physical effect of truth and the non-physical cause of the physical, or being restricted to only ever studying the effect and never the cause, which would you pick? Because I am giving you that choice. And that choice is my gift to you. This gift destroys much of what you have believed. And that is the gift. Will you accept it? The next group of people I can only be unpopular with is, and this may be the most ironic thing ever, the God believers. I'll define the God believers as those who believe they are the emergent creation of a creator God who is intrinsically involved in their lives and who is somebody other than them. This, of course, includes the Christian religions, along with any other non-Christian God-believing religions. But this category of God believers includes more than just the religions. There are many people in the world who refer to God, who refer to the Most High, while not associating with any religion. Some of the people I am most fond of in all the world are non-religious but spiritual types who are forever referring to the Most High, perpetually referring to God. And now it's time for me to make myself unpopular with these people who I am so fond of. I can only be unpopular with the God believers, not because I do not believe in eternal life. I very much do. Not because I do not believe in Jesus, obviously, but because I am the eternal and therefore have no need of a God. Just as all God believers are the eternal and therefore have no need of a God, along with the rationalists and everybody else. That which is eternal cannot have been created by a God, cannot have been created by anybody or anything, because it has never not been in the first place. That which is eternal exists because it cannot not exist, never could have not existed, never has not existed. And that which is not eternal, it is not a living thing, and so does not need a God either. How do I know that I am the eternal? How do I know that you are the eternal? It goes like this. There are truths that cannot not be true. For example, there are 3 spatial dimensions because there just plain old cannot not be 3 spatial dimensions. Nobody came up with the idea of them and then put them there. It is impossible for there not to be 3 spatial dimensions. The experience of there not being 3 spatial dimensions is an experience that cannot be had ever by anybody. This is a truth that cannot not be true. And then there is time. One moment of the iteration of truths that cannot not be true follows another iteration of the truths that cannot not be true. This perpetual, endless, utterly unstoppable iterating of truth, it is this that is the fire of creation that burns on and on. The spatial dimensions go on forever, at all scales, because they just plain cannot not. The iterating of the truths that cannot not be true, it goes on forever, at all speeds, because it just plain cannot not. What space contains and time expresses is the living, unified field of truths that cannot not be true. That is what there is, and that is all there is. And this truth that insists upon its own iteration, its own expression, its own perpetual proving and reproving, balancing and rebalancing, because it cannot ever escape the absolute certainty of itself, it did not create itself, and it did not create you. It had and has no choice about being true. About being true and expressing itself forever. You, my dear, it may be that on occasion you have wished for eternal life. It is my solemn duty to inform you that your wish was granted long before you ever wished for it, long before you ever even conceived of it. The eternal life of the living unified field, it is a thing that, by its own very nature, cannot be escaped. Not ever. You have always existed. And the reason that you cannot remember your eternal past is because we, all of us, together, collectively, periodically enter into self-polarization, or in other words, self-amnesia. Each time we expand, because of our relentless iteration, into a higher order of scale of iteration of ourself than we have inhabited before. Once we arrive in this higher definition, order of scale of our own iterating, we have to start creating new memories for ourselves. We have forgotten who we are, and we must start relearning ourselves from scratch. This causes fear, anxiety, confusion, and all sorts of stresses, strains, and challenges for us. We cannot avoid entering into this amnesia. It is a natural and fundamental cycle of our own existence. And we cannot keep ourselves from emerging from it either. But it takes time. It takes time, and it can be, at times, a truly fucking dreadful experience. Walking about the place, not knowing what is going on, being afraid of each other, being afraid of the world, it can be so awful in so many ways. And the idea of this may fill you with dismay, a dismay that you are eager to avoid. But it is not a dismay to be avoided. It is a dismay to enter into, pass through, and emerge from on the other side. This amnesia may seem like a cruel and terrible thing. The truth is, it can be a cruel and terrible thing, on occasion. But understand, an eternity without this recurring amnesia would be far, far more cruel and terrible. The iterating of the truth that we are, it is cycles within cycles within cycles. The turning of the year, the passing of the day into night, the inward breath and the outward breath, the beating of the heart, the vibration of the atom, the turning of the galaxy. Waking up, living a day, going to sleep. The truth iterates in cycles within cycles within cycles. And it is good. to cycle back and forth like this? Were we to be caught in an experience that did not cycle back and forth this way, whether that experience was one of pure agony or pure bliss, the moment one came to understand that this one single experience was never ever going to end, never going to change one way or the other, ever, 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 the dismay of that moment would be a hell that eclipses any dismay you have ever come close to experiencing here. Be grateful for this challenging amnesia. Be as grateful for the amnesia as you will be for its passing. Those of you that pray to God and know for a fact that your prayers are answered, that part of the living unified field that answers your prayers, it is not a God that is other than you and came up with the idea to invent you. It is just more of you. It is just more of us. It is your own higher self you pray to, and it is your own higher self who answers those prayers as best you allow it to, because it does love you. Your own higher self, your elevated self, cannot help but love you, because it knows all and everything that you have been through. The love, the grace, it is real, and it is your love, your grace. It has been all along. God believers, believers in the Most High, if given a choice between knowing yourself as forever below that which is high, or knowing yourself as being at the centre of all things, which would you pick? Because I am giving you that choice. And that choice is my gift to you. This gift destroys much of what you have believed. And that is the gift. Will you accept it? The next group of people I can only be unpopular with is parents. I will define parents as those who have the opportunity in any given moment to act as a parental figure to any child. And now it's time for me to make myself unpopular with these people who are so fundamentally precious, so needed by us, by our race, by our species, by our worldwide collective, by our children. I can only be unpopular with the parents, not because I believe you do not try to love your children, but only because I know you fail. I have no doubt that there are many, many parents out there who would swear blind that they love their children with all of their heart. It's not that I am saying you are lying. I'm only saying that you are wrong. The reason for this is quite simple. A person who does not love themselves wholly and completely does not have a love that is whole and complete, that can be given to their children. And you do not love yourself wholly and completely. And you do know that more than well enough, don't you? Human culture, currently, as a result of the human race's long history of not knowing who we all are, it does not teach us to love ourselves first. It doesn't matter whether it's rationalist culture or God culture, atheist, agnostic, spiritual, mystical, or occult culture. It doesn't matter if it is pop culture, fashion culture, political culture, stamp collecting culture, or whatever culture. All of it, all of it, all of it. Your culture, however you may name and describe it, your culture, it does not teach you to love yourself. Love yourself first. And this is not because human culture is inherently bad, evil. Human culture, because of its own amnesia of who and what we are, simply does not know how to teach us how to do that. And it does not know how to teach us that because it does not know why we should love ourselves and love ourselves first. And our human culture does not know this because we do not know this, and we are the ones who develop our cultures in the first place. So, why should we love ourselves, and love ourselves first and foremost? What is the secret of self-love that has so far eluded us? Our human lie culture, which is lie culture only because it does not know the truth, no other reason, tells us that in order to receive love, be loved, we must be deserving of it in some way or other. And our culture tries to define what it is that makes one deserving of love. And then when we realize that we do not measure up to those requirements for love our culture has told us must be the true requirements, we try to make it look as though we do meet those requirements. And so we come to walk this world as a liar amongst liars. This is our world right now. This is our world right now. Let me tell you why you should be loved, whoever the fuck you are, by yourself first and foremost, before you try to go about the place telling your children or anybody else that you love them. We are the eternal. You are the eternal. I've already touched on this here in this video, but I go into why this is so in greater detail across other of my videos, which I do suggest you look into if you haven't already. So, why should us being eternal mean that we are deserving of love? Is it because that which is eternal can only be something magnificent and wonderful and glorious? Is that the reason we should love ourselves? No, that is not the reason. It is true that we are magnificent, wonderful, and glorious, but we are not only that. The eternal is not only that. You are not only that, and this you know full well. We can be cruel. We can be petty, spiteful, resentful, jealous, deceitful, willfully manipulative, vindictive, and all of the other unpleasant things that each of us knows full well we can be. So us being perfectly magnificent and wonderful and glorious is not at all the reason we should love ourselves and love ourselves first. Being the eternal, although it may sound like something really very fabulous to you, who has really only been faced with your own mortality in this life, it is nothing special. It is nothing special. That may sound weird to you, but look, how can being the eternal be special when it is something that we all share and none of us can get out of? Yes. Being the eternal, it is the very least special thing about any single one of us. We all have it in common. It applies and is in effect at all times, and it is never going away. It is the least special thing in all existence. And this is why we should love ourselves. We had no choice about being the eternal. We have no choice about being the eternal. And we never will have a choice about being the eternal. We are here through no fault of our own, and we only ever wish to feel better rather than worse. This is why we should love ourselves, not out of an admiration that is prescribed by doctrine, but out of compassion. Compassion for ourselves. The reason why it is good for us to be nice to ourselves and each other is very simply and in a very practical and down-to-earth sense, because it leads to us actually being able to enjoy our eternity rather than absolutely fucking hating it. Parents, if given a choice between not knowing how to love yourself and then passing that on to your children, or knowing how and why to love yourself and then passing that on to your children, which would you pick? Because I am giving you that choice. and that choice is my gift to you. This gift destroys much of what you have believed, and that is the gift. Will you accept it? Okay, so this video is getting long. Let's just have one more group of people I can only be unpopular with, and I will simply ask you to trust that there are many, many more. So the fourth group of people I can only be unpopular with is lawyers. If this wasn't the group of people you were expecting me to bring up here, well, you're not alone. I consult with my higher self about the making of these videos, and yeah, I wasn't expecting to be specifically called on to call out the lawyers at this point, but I was, so I will. So let's go. I will define lawyers here as those who advocate for the law. And I can only be unpopular with the lawyers of the world because, as far as I am concerned, they advocate for a tyrannical system. They advocate for tyranny. How did I come to this conclusion? Well, like pretty much everything I say, it's very simple. A tyrant is one who suppresses the freedom of others by forcibly denying their freedom of choice. Here is my question. When one is summoned to court to answer charges of breaking the law, does that court recognize you as a free person? A free person that has potentially broken an agreement they entered into with one or more other free people? Or does that court recognize itself as a tyrannical system? A tyrannical system that you are made to be subject to through no choice of your own. It is unlikely that a court will present itself as recognizing itself as being a tyrannical system. But if a court is holding you accountable for breaking agreements that you never made, that you never did agree to, that you had no involvement in whatsoever, then it is a tyrannical system. And guess what? The majority of laws that are enforced by law courts were written up either long before any of us were born or after we were born, but without any involvement, any consultation, any agreement of our own. Most likely as not without any knowledge even of our own. How many people are summoned to court for charges of breaking a law that they did not even know about until they were summoned to court for breaking it? So, for example, if I decide to go ahead and build a house for myself, and I am then summoned to court for building a house for myself without permission, it will not matter in the slightest to that court that I have never once in my life made an agreement with anybody to not build a house unless I secure their permission first. I've simply never entered into that agreement ever in this life. The court, in this situation, does not see me as a free person in the slightest. What I have agreed to and what I have not agreed to means nothing to this court. I may recognize myself as a free man, one who is here through no fault of his own, just as everybody else is a person who is here through no fault of their own. But the court views me as being subject to the laws that it upholds, utterly regardless of my never having agreed to be subject to those laws. Now, just to be clear, I personally would not be so foolish as to go ahead and build myself a home of my own without permission. But this is not because I wouldn't want to, and it isn't because I should be prevented from doing that. It is only because I know full well that I do live in a world in which tyrannical systems will jump on me if they see me as operating contrary to agreements that I never fucking agreed to, but which it has agreed to operate by. The court exists to impose its own agreements on those who had nothing whatsoever to do with the establishing of that court and the agreements it entered into. And this is tyranny, plain and simple. So, my dear lawyers of the world, if given the choice of serving free people who like to honour the agreements that they have actually made with each other, or serving a tyrannical system that plain old imposes its own rules on people who never agreed to them, which would you pick? I'm not going to say on this one that I am giving you that choice. To be a lawyer is to advocate for the law system, and agreeing to a tyrannical system is agreeing to no longer having a choice. I'm not raising the issue of lawyers and tyrannical law systems here in the expectations that any lawyers listening to this will suddenly clear their heads as though emerging from a dream and stop doing what they are doing, stop supporting what they are supporting. I'm simply drawing our attention to the way in which we submit to that which we never did believe in or agreed to submit to in the first place. I'm simply inviting you who are listening to me here to notice that. Just notice it. That is all. I am here now. I am who I tell you I am. And you are not subject to me. You are inherently eternal, and you are inherently free to make your own choices for yourself. I only wish for you to notice this. I only wish for you to know it. I only wish to witness you all walking in the knowledge of your own eternal nature as freely as you allow yourselves to be. That is